Steve Jobs, a magician in innovating fantastic consumer products. How did he become so magical? That's a question. That's a curiosity. Once, a student of mine came to me and asked me that he wanted to innovate like Steve Jobs. But if it is a magical power, he is a creative genius by born, then how can we help someone to learn to innovate like the way Steve Jobs did? Let's look into Steve Jobs' underlying capability of innovating like a magician. Just right after his death, several media outlets published tributes on Steve Jobs, and one of them is The Economist, and it highlighted or attributed Steve Jobs as a magician. Where did it start? His magical journey. It all started with this wooden box. That is Apple I computer. And certainly it was not a magical outcome. It was just an ordinary toy box. Like Steve Jobs and Wozniak, many others are making something like this. And they were showing those things into a computer club, a homebrew computer club in California. So it was not his magical power to come up with this wooden box of computer having even no monitor, just a printed circuit board inside the box and a keyboard attached to it. Basically, it's a simple toy for hobbyists. Then they kept progressing and came up with this one, that is Apple II. And it was not magical either. At that time, Commodore and many other companies are bringing personal computers having basically text-based interface, and it was one of the many things, and market didn't respond it with a wow impression. All of those things changed with the emergence of this one. That's the Macintosh. This is completely different from Apple I and Apple II. It has graphical user interface, Windows, mouse, and all that. We started the change the course of personal computer. But how did Steve Jobs got all those fancy ideas? It came from here. That is a computer developed at Xerox's research center in California. That is Xerox Park Alto Center. Almost over a decade or so, scientists did research there and developed many features of today's modern computer, like graphical user interface, Ethernet connection, mouse, video games, Windows-based screen management, bitmap editor, even the early version of the Paint program. And Xerox's research group made this machine usable by their own research staff and other users. But Xerox didn't seriously pursue its commercial interest. So it made it open for anyone to take it. Steve Jobs showed up there and he took all of them. And that thing culminated into Macintosh, the path-breaking innovation in the personal computing industry. Then came up with his miracle, that is iPhone. And what was the killer feature? That was multi-touch. But did Steve develop this multi-touch technology from the basic? Is it a creation of Apple? Of course not. It came from CERN, MIT, University of Toronto, Carnegie Mellon University, Bell Labs. They were doing research on this thing in 1970s. Then how did Steve get a finger on that? Steve went out and bought a company called Fingerworks at Delaware. That company was commercializing some of the multi-touch based devices. So it seems that Steve took all those fancy ideas, creating wow impression from others. Then where is the magic? That's an interesting thing we should look into. Steve's approach was to conceive certain features, certain products, of creating wow impression among the minds of target customers. But many of the core technologies Apple didn't have. So what Steve did, Steve looked around and figured out who had. Then he acquired them, either through licensing or through acquisition. Then did he start just producing them and selling them in creating a success story? Answer is no. What he did, he kept asking his science and engineering team to keep refining them, to keep fusing them, and taking it to a situation which creates a significant wow impression, which is significantly different from the place where he started. His passion of perfection, his passion of pursuing a relentless journey of perfection in advancing acquired technologies, fine tuning them, fusing them, eventually creating a significantly attractive features in his products. That is the genesis or the origin or the secret of Steve Jobs' magical innovation power. And this gives a good lesson, a great lesson to startups and to innovators, that it is not about coming up with a great idea. It is not about trying to build all of the things by yourselves or ourselves. We need to take those things from many other places. But instead of just reproducing them and trying to sell them, trying to push them in the market, keep advancing them, keep refining them to reach to a situation when they create significant, surprising experience among the target customers, so that target customers will emerge them with a wow impression. And that requires a culture of pursuing perfection. It happens to be among many of the startups, among many of the innovators, and many of the firms, this basic requirement of the culture of pursuing for perfection is absent. As a matter of fact, Japanese companies outperform Americans primarily by pursuing this culture of relentless perfection. Thank you very much.